Welcome to the Filmlings podcast.
A bi-weekly podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 86, Family Feud.
Where Jonathan and I are in the same place to literally fight each other.
Yes, we are going to be feuding. We are not literal family, but pretty darn close.
I think I've been honorarily adopted by the Satchel Clan on a few occasions. And then also honorarily... what's it called when you get disowned?
Disowned.
Occasionally.
Yeah, it goes back and forth. But you're still here. And we have a video episode, so anyone who's just listening to the audio of this, you can go check out the blog and watch us talk, or just avoid that completely, depending on how you feel about our faces. Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about today, Jonathan?
We're talking about families.
And how did we get to that decision, Jonathan?
So we posted a poll on our Patreon, Patreon.
Yeah, you said it
right. Our patrons voted on the poll on
loving
Patreon.
Family of patrons.
Yes, our Patreon family has voted on different type. We posted a poll about different types of love and relationships and that kind of thing, and so they decided on family love. And so we have decided to pick a wide range of films that kind of come at the theme of family from very different angles, and also aiming at very different target audiences within different genres with different tones, all that kind of stuff. The one thing that we have avoided, though, is a type of family movie that is incredibly prevalent. We realize that there are a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those genres that comes and goes.
Yeah.
But the family movie or the family comedy, which is typically kind of lowbrow, low-hanging fruit comedy, very generic and wide-ranging, typically not critically acclaimed, or and they typically don't have legs on them either. I'm thinking about stuff like the more recent National Lampoon movies, or the Medea family movies, which almost made the podcast.
Just because I was those are very prevalent types of family movies. So we're not going for those, not the very crude stuff, and also not the really hallmarky kind of made for the family types of things.
Not something that you would leave on in the background while you do something else.
Or take the kids too, and you're not afraid of what might be in there.
Maybe you like cooking lamb chops while you watch The Road in the background. That would be a little disturbing. But hey, we're not here to judge unless you're making movies. Then we're definitely here to judge. I think this kind of echoes back to when we were talking about revenge just last time on the podcast, Jonathan, and that this is one of those archetypal motivations that's been there forever. It's fundamentally human in a way. We're all stuck with a family, whether they're our biological family or a family of people that we've grown into over
people
the
we
years,
look up to,
but just people that were maybe the best way to describe a family is not people you're related to, but people you're stuck with. Because they're unavoidable in a way. And sometimes we get along with them very well. Sometimes we don't. And we're going to see multiple examples of that here. And that kind of connection with a person can drive you to do things that are crazy, insane, self-harming, or just superhuman in a way. Literally superhuman in a way.
There you
unintentional, go. But I was thinking more of The Road, the drive to survive, to further your family or to protect the ones you love and care about. But also, yes, literally superheroes. But
so as we've been teasing,
movies are we talking about today specifically, Jonathan?
So we are starting off with the Royal Tenenbaums from 2001, directed by Wes Anderson. At least one of us here is a huge fan of Wes Anderson.
It's Jonathan.
I do like Wes Anderson a lot, but Alex's love for Wes Anderson kind of takes the cake.
I'm a very big Wes Anderson fan. Yes, this is true.
Royal Tenenbaums was
documented.
Nominated for Best Original Screenplay by Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson. We talked about the relationship between Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson a lot on the Wes Anderson episode. Long time ago, beginning of season 1.
They were roommates at my alma mater of University of Texas at Austin.
Yep. That's how Owen Wilson got his career started. And then we'll be talking about The Incredibles from 2004, directed by Brad Bird, who also directed the last animated film we did on the podcast, which was Iron Giant. The Incredibles won Best Sound Editing, Best Animated Film, and was nominated for Best Original Screenplay and Best Sound Mixing. And finally, as we've already been talking about, we'll be talking about The Road from 2009, definitely the darkest of the lot, directed by John Hillcoat, based on a 2006 novel of the same name by Cormac McCarthy, and that won a BAFTA nomination for Best Cinematography. I actually am surprised. I feel like that movie would have won more awards in the early 2000s.
It was a bit of a flop.
Yeah, it's interesting.
A little bit.
But there's a lot of films that I feel like had the same kind of a tone around that time in the late 90s, early 2000s that I feel like it kind of fit into. But that's interesting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it. I still have mixed feelings about the movie.
Yeah.
So we'll unpack all of that. But that's the third movie on the podcast, Jonathan. Just because we're biased and we tend to do things in the order that they came out in.
Yeah.
But first, we have to talk about the Royal Tenenbaums. And before we can talk about the Royal Tenenbaums, Jason has to talk about the Royal Tenenbaums. So Jason, talk about the Royal Tenenbaums.
The Royal Tenenbaums from 2001. The Tenenbaums are, or at the least were, a family of geniuses. The oldest child, Chaz, proves an excellent inventor and businessman from a young age. The adopted daughter, Margot, is a promising playwright and wordsmith. The youngest kid, Richie, is a burgeoning tennis all-star. But as they entered their adolescent years, the family breaks apart. The father, Royal, is a successful and smart attorney, but also a complete rapscallion, and leaves the children to be raised by their archaeologist mother, Ethel. Decades pass, and what once remained of the young Tenenbaums' promise is long gone. Chaz is on the verge of a mental breakdown after his wife dies in a plane crash. He endlessly runs his two young children on a rigorous, healthy, and exceedingly safe daily regimen. Seeking safety, he returns to his childhood home, which his mother still occupies. Richie, always secretly in love with his adoptive sister, had a complete breakdown at a tennis match the day after she married her second husband. He now travels the world, isolated on a boat, sending letters to his childhood friend, turned famous author Elliot Cash, who is secretly having an affair with Margot. Margot, also secretly in love with Richie, has compensated for that and her adoptive status in the family by quitting the playwriting business to travel the world in a string of empty relationships and finally settling down into a loveless marriage. When Ethel's business manager, Henry, finally confesses his love for her and Ethel seriously considers his proposal, it brings Royal Tenenbaum crashing back into the family picture. Royal and Ethel had never completely divorced, and now that his position as absentee head of the family is threatened, Royal concocts a plan to get the family he abandoned back. He shows up at Ethel's doorstep, claiming to have only 6 weeks left to live. The alarm brings the rest of the Tenenbaum children home. The Tenenbaums are smarter and larger than life than your average family. But can those genius minds overcome their proportionally huge dysfunctionality?
All right, Jonathan, do you know what we have here?
We have The Royal Tenenbaums by Wes Anderson.
Well, yes, but what do we have here?
Okay, so this movie is our dysfunctional family film.
Oh,
is that what
this
you're
is
getting
a
at?
dysfunctional family
This
film.
is the dysfunctional family film of the lot.
Highly dysfunctional. And the funny thing is they're juxtaposing a highly dysfunctional family with a set of people who are very intelligent, who in their younger days were all considered geniuses or very successful in their respective fields, whether it be sports or business or arts or archaeology. The mother's really successful too, and I feel like that kind of gets overshadowed in the course of the movie, but she is. Mm-hmm. But who are all incredibly high achieving people until it comes to their personal lives. And when they trace it all back, they all find that the dysfunction starts at their weird family level. And it's just all over the place. And of course, it's a movie and it's bigger than real life in a way and a little more artsy than real life in a way.
A little.
Well, very, because it's Wes Anderson. But the dysfunction has been cranked up to 11.
Yeah.
But even then, I feel like the facts of what happened in the movie aren't completely outlandish compared to some of the family stories I've heard from people.
Yeah.
Like,
do you
know what I mean? Like, it's messed up, but
not to the point where you can't believe that this would be someone's story or their backstory.
Yeah. And I think this is typically the Wes Anderson movie that I point to when somebody who's never seen a Wes Anderson movie or has seen like a snippet of one and they don't like it. or they're interested and they want more. I typically point to this one as like the most accessible. Either that or Moonrise, if I know they're just into that.
I feel like now that Isle of Dogs has come out, that's probably a pretty good entry.
Maybe, but it's still claymation, which is still a little different and still very artsy and a little distant. But I feel like this is one of the ones that's easiest to connect with for people, because one of the nice universal things about family is that we all have one of sorts. Even those of us who, sadly are orphans or are disconnected from their family. Yeah. Typically, wherever you are, you're surrounded by a group of people who you're stuck with in a way.
And they even deal a little bit with some of the more, I guess, marginalized parts of family in the fact of Margot being adopted. Yeah. And kind of the baggage that comes with that.
Yep. And very knowing of her adoption. Yeah. Because her dad won't stop reminding her about it.
Yeah, exactly. Which, again, is part of that dysfunction, is part of the thing that makes that part of the story feel very real, because I'm sure there's plenty of adopted people who felt like they never felt like completely included. And so, this film has a lot of entry points for, like, they try to make all the characters so diverse that there's a huge range of entry points.
You have somebody in this film that you can connect to.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Whether it's the OCD, like hyper particular and I guess safe.
Angry at his dad.
Yeah, Ben Stiller, who felt like he never got enough attention.
And then there's Luke Wilson, who is kinder with his dad because he was his dad's favorite.
Yeah, he was the dad's boy.
But also has a lot of other things going on. The mother who's trying to keep it all together but can't. The disconnected father. Yeah. And even like new add-ons into the family, like the soon-to-be new stepfather. Yeah, who's coming in to the family, and even at the very end, like in the last 15 minutes, the new stepbrother who's there too.
Yeah, I know. I didn't even mention him.
Yeah, no, I love how that sneaks up on people, because they're so involved in their own family dysfunction that they're like, oh wow. And at the end, I'm kind of feeling bad for him. I'm like, oh no, you have to be part of this, man. Yeah.
But thankfully he's like already grown. Seems like he's got his feet on the
ground. And talking about somebody who doesn't really seem to have a family of their own, Owen Wilson's character, Elliot Cash.
Yeah, the friend from across the street.
He has his own family in a way, but he never spends any time with them. Yeah. And he seems very disconnected. He spent a lot of time with his aunt in New York. So clearly, like, whatever situation is going on with his own parents, he's not very connected to them, or it seems fairly distant from them. And so he's kind of glommed on to the Tenenbaums. Yeah, in a way as well,
but you can tell that his own family baggage has definitely taken a toll.
Oh yeah,
by the time that we get to them all grown up, and he's like deep into like drugs, and like every scene he's in, he's just like.
I love that we lead in with this great prologue that establishes all of the characters. And in like this,
which is par for the course for Wes Anderson,
which is very Wes Anderson,
but it helps.
But it helps because you start off with an idea of this character, and you start off with this backstory about them being a genius or being excellent at whatever they're doing, and you, based on that, you build up an expectation of that character, and then over the course of the movie, the characters become so much more fleshed out than you could ever expect them to be. That it's shocking. There's always more beneath the surface, and there's always more going on as these characters start to reconsider things from different points of view and come back together. Just in that way, in terms of like script, it's a beautiful family movie. Yeah. In that regard, but also in terms of style, obviously the crazy zaniness of the family is like a weirdly safe place for Wes Anderson to be his quirkiest, because when we're with our families is when we're at our weirdest. And I think that's when we also get the closest to being a Wes Anderson character, because all of our quirks show on the surface. We're not all pretending to be normal people. And also just his strong sense of like color palette as well. I love that this whole movie, except for like one scene, which is the bathroom scene, Luke Wilson, which gets really dark, is in a very warm color palette. Everything is in like this warm, rich reds and browns and pinks. The whole house is done up in that red wallpaper. So even as they're fighting, it's like they're in this safe place. So they're fighting and they can deal with their crap, but they're still in the safe zone of family at the same time, which is excellent when you're trying to discuss what a family is.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, especially that Luke Wilson scene where it does get really dark, because there is a lot of dark stuff kind of under the surface throughout the whole thing. And we talked about this in the Wes Anderson episode, that's one of the things that he does really well, is mixing these really dark and real and intense themes, but kind of doing it in, it's not like dismissive, but the style itself is a lot lighter. Because I was thinking through this whole thing, like you could make the really dramatic version of this where you're kind of going almost like to theatrical levels of drama, like Raisin in the Sun or something like that, where people are down on their knees and they're yelling. They're like, why have you done this to me? You're my family or whatever. But that's not the way that Wes Anderson does. It's played straight, even through all the dark parts. It's just kind of like presenting everything. And it's all kind of, all the really dark stuff is hidden underneath, to some extent, which goes into a lot of the characters. Like a lot of to some extent, you're right. As far as when we're with our families, we're not feeling like we're trying to put on airs, but at some level we are, especially those darker parts of ourselves that we don't want those people really close to us to know about. So like Margot always hiding her like smoking habit and stuff like that. I love how every time like she's like, oh yeah, I've had like all of these affairs and all this stuff, but you started smoking? That's like the only thing anyone remembers.
Yeah, that there's a secret about somebody, right, that you've known for so long, and yet how could it be possible that you don't know such a fundamental thing about them? Yeah.
And then getting even to like the confrontation, like Owen Wilson, who doesn't really try to hide his problem. He just tries to act like it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, his spiraling out of control drug problem.
Yeah, but he doesn't hide it. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I'm on mescaline. I have no idea what's going on right now.
I am totally messed up right now. Yeah, no, it gets intense. I love the mix of drama and intense moments. Like, I mean, somebody gets stabbed in this movie.
Yeah.
And somebody tries to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. All sorts of really dark stuff happen, and yet there's also like this kind of like light comedic tone at the same time around the whole thing, because life is reality is like a mix of drama and comedy, depending on how you look at it at certain times. So I mean, in a movie that's pure comedy and a movie that's pure drama, you're skewing away from reality in a little bit of a way, a different way in each case, like Raisin in the Sun versus like a family comedy like a Medea movie or whatever that most recent Ed Helms National Lampoon thing was.
I don't even know.
With the RV. Me neither.
Could have been RV. There's a movie called RV.
Yeah.
That was older though.
Yeah. Yep. I remember something with Vince Vaughn and like a raccoon attacking him.
Yeah. They all kind of blur together. They all blur
together. They're all very generic. There's what's that one with like David Spade and Kevin Smith, Grown Ups.
Yeah.
Grown Ups 1 and Grown Ups 2. They made a second
one.
There
were 2 Grown Ups.
Yep. Very basic comedy.
Yeah. A lot of the Adam Sandler, like the, what is it, My Boy and the Jack and Jill and all that kind of stuff.
Jack and Jill.
Just
yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I feel like this movie falls more in the camp of things like Chef or Little Miss Sunshine or something like that. That kind of
very close to Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah, stuff like that. So that's why, again, trying to pick a range, I feel like there's a bunch of movies that we can kind of make a lot of the similar comments on that go, but this is just like Wes Anderson's personal take. And another thing I was going to say is we talked about before, I don't remember exactly where, but the classic Charlie Chaplin quote, tragedy is a close-up, comedy is a wide shot. And I feel like that philosophy is kind of in this film writ large, just in Wes Anderson's whole style.
Oh, yeah, he loves some good wides.
His whole style is, it's physically wide, but it's also just kind of like a really wide scope on this whole situation.
Yeah, you get in all these odds and ends of a person's life.
Yeah, and the closer we get in, the more personal and tragic it starts to feel. Mm-hmm. But Wes Anderson always has like, his style kind of always gives him that way to pull out and show the ridiculousness of whatever it is he's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because most situations are pretty ridiculous when you get down to it.
Yeah, when you take a step back from it and you're not like right in it.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about his wide shots, he always uses them as a good way. And all of his movies are great examples of this, but this one as well, especially because each person has a unique form of genius, whether it's Bill Murray's like,
who really takes a back seat in this movie.
Yeah. His like psychoanalysis thing that he's got going on, or each of the children's rooms are decorated differently, and the mother's office, Angelica Houston's office, is decorated in archaeology based things. Everything is different, and he uses the wide shot and the availability of really getting into the nitty gritty with production design to tell you a bunch about these characters that you might not know about otherwise. And it really gives you a fleshed out sense of who they are as a person that you might not get in another movie. And it's something that I really enjoy because it's part of what makes these characters feel so rounded and like actually like a character, and very much like a character rather than maybe a real life person. Like they all feel like really well developed literary characters in a way.
Right, characters that kind of embody something bigger. Yeah.
They've got something more attached to them than just what they've got going on the personal level. But at the personal level, they're still well-rounded.
Yeah.
And it's also something that Wes Anderson gets poked fun at a lot. And just as like the perpetual Wes Anderson defender that I am, like, yes, it's quirky and it's odd, but it's not there for the sake of being quirky and odd. It's there for the sake of, like, this is what the character does. This is like, if they're an archaeologist, they're going to have all of these things around them in some place, shape, or form. I would rather have someone be bold enough to put all that stuff on screen rather than just give me some generic looking room.
Yeah.
Like, you know, show me what's going on. Like, I'm here to see it. Like, show me what this character likes, what they keep on them, whether they keep their stuff in straight lines, whether or not they keep it messy, whether or not they smoke in the bathtub with a TV tied to the radiator so it doesn't fall in. Like, that's a very precise detail.
Yeah, which clues us into her state of mind, which is always like slightly suicidal, but never completely.
I guess if the TV falls in, not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like, she wouldn't be that upset about it. So, yeah. And then in terms of close-up, I know a lot of people have a lot to say about the Wes Anderson expressionless face. But I feel like sometimes and I feel like this movie is a very good example of it, the words of what's going on and then a mix of like the Kuleshov effect is more than enough for the actor to do very subtle acting in a close-up and give you all of the meaning that's there. And if you're not into that, you're not into that.
Yeah, because Wes Anderson, he almost takes the emotion out of the actors to some extent and puts it in the scene design and the shot design and all that kind of stuff. Like, he's telling you what everyone is feeling based on what he's showing you around them at any given time. So even if you don't see it on their face, but you hear it in their dialogue and you see it in the mise-en-scène in each of the scenes.
This is where we flash up the subtitle that says film school word.
Film school word, mise-en-scène.
This will be on the quiz later. Introducing a new tier on Patreon. Quiz tier.
Yeah, I just feel like we've gone too many episodes without saying mise-en-scène, so I had to bring it up.
Mise-en-scène.
It's like in the contract.
Mise-en-scène.
So the other thing to talk about as far as Royal Tenenbaums and what it goes for in its family theme is getting to this place of reconciliation and forgiveness. Because again, everyone has a lot of kind of messed up stuff in their background. And the film is a process of each of the characters admitting those things and allowing the other characters the chance to forgive them and then help them move on. So like Owen Wilson is a really good example because I just love the scene where Luke Wilson goes to confront him and Owen Wilson just goes, man, I wish we would have done this like years ago when we were kids. And Luke Wilson was like, well, you didn't have a drug problem back then. And so it's this idea of, stop ignoring this thing that, is such a big part of someone's life, but is also very detrimental. And having the courage to kind of open up about that, and then also to say, hey, you need help, let me help you.
Yeah, I feel like the connection to real life is that a lot of people leave some things unresolved in their past, and it becomes something that weighs on them and steers their life in ways that they might not want it steered. And that's definitely the case for the whole Tenenbaum family. I mean, even if you look at the title, the Royal Tenenbaums, it is the Royal Tenenbaums, Royal being the first name of the dad.
Right.
Not just the fact that they're all geniuses or that they're tops in their fields or whatever, but that is literally the era they're stuck in. And then their dad leaves when they are kids, and that's like the point where their adolescence stops. And they never really get past it to a certain extent. So this is them kind of completing the era of the Royal Tenenbaums so that they can just be the Tenenbaums and move forward and be whoever is the healthiest version of themselves, or the healthiest version of themselves that they each individually can attain. Because I think there's some limiting, obviously. But until they resolve it, they can't move on. And even like the way the movie is structured, the way it ends very much suggests that this is the closing. I think it ends on a gate closing. So this is the end of that era. Now it is the Tenenbaums.
And of course, Royal Tenenbaum is kind of the ultimate kind of culmination of all of these things, and it's not an easy process because as they go through, like, you know, he has good intentions, he's trying to reconnect and all this, and then they find out that he's lying, and he's lying about this, and he's lying about that, which just makes it so much harder on everybody. But eventually they're able to just kind of, you know, as he like admits what he's done, where he is, that he has no money, that he needs this and that and that, then everyone kind of like, they're like, it's okay, we're here for you, but it's a roller coaster getting there. There's a lot of big forgiving. The forgiving is a big mood in this movie. And not necessarily because everybody wants to, or like amends have been made, but maybe because everybody just has to. Because again, you're stuck with each other.
Because at a certain point they're punishing themselves for not forgiving each other. And so they have to do that to move on. And there's a lot of like deep personal lessons that could be excavated from this film if you want to go that deep, or you can just enjoy the movie. Either way. Or both. Why not? Enjoy.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to The Incredibles. Jason, take it away.
The Incredibles from 2004. In a version of the mid-20th century where superheroes exist, it just so happens that they've fallen out of favor. After a string of controversies, the public has turned on them, and supers vanish from the world back into their secret, mundane identities. Two such former supers are Bob and Helen Parr, previously known as Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl. They now live as suburban homemakers with their children. Violet, who can turn invisible and form force fields, Dash, who can run fast, really fast, and baby Jack-Jack, who doesn't show any signs of power. Yet. The family struggles trying to be average, hiding and repressing their superpowers that make them unique. Bob especially misses the exciting life he used to live, full of fun and adventure, and is easily tempted into accepting an offer to resume clandestine superhero activities. These activities, superheaded by the mysterious Syndrome, aren't quite what they seem to be, and as Bob's involvement starts to rattle apart his family, he'll need them more than ever to rescue him from the mess he's fallen into. Can the Incredibles come together both as a superhero team and a family to save the day?
All right, so we're back in the animation world. The Incredibles has a very different target audience than the Royal Tenenbaums does.
Hopefully. I mean, that would be weird. Imagine if like a bunch of like elementary schoolers really got into Wes Anderson all of a sudden. That would actually, I would love that. But
that's it's actually kind of a one-way street because one of the things that Brad Bird is really big on is the idea that The Incredibles and pretty much all of his animated movies are not kids' films per se. Like we were talking about, this kind of like easy, safe movies to bring your kids to and stuff like that. He's like, it's an animated film that's rated PG, but it's not like just for kids. Which might be a little bit of a fine distinction, but I mean, you can see where he's going.
It's definitely not just for kids, but that doesn't... I mean, definitely for sure. I mean, like, think about all of the implied sex in this movie.
Oh my gosh.
There's like a full montage of implied sex in this movie.
There's so much that I was just like, wait a second. I never realized that.
Like that I did not catch when I was a kid, which is the point. But of course, I also feel like animated movies, while they're not necessarily kids movies, definitely fall into that category because they are marketed to kids mostly.
Especially Pixar. I mean, this is definitely a movie that, is great to bring kids to. It's a movie that kids can get a lot out of, but it's not strictly like just give this to your kids and ignore it as a piece of work.
And I feel like it also has to kind of function on multiple levels, at least with the humor, because there's obviously humor in there that's for kids, and there's obviously humor in there that's for adults.
Yeah,
and
but
then the adult humor is definitely meant to fly under the radar.
And it's not one of those really blatant ones where it's kind of like really winking and nodding at the audience. It works for multiple audiences, but all at the same time without being like, this joke is just for the parents kind of a thing. Like kids probably still pick up on, some of those tensions and stuff there, even if the adults are like getting the full like underlying meaning on some of the stuff. But one of the things that I also was thinking while watching this movie is that superhero movies weren't what they are today when this movie came out.
Oh, for sure.
This comes out around, I think before Batman Begins, around the time
before the Batman trilogy,
the first couple
Iron Man,
X-Men. So
I don't know if it was before X-Men.
I think the first couple had come out.
Yeah.
I did in my notes for this week, you guys can go look it up because I listed all the superhero movies I could think of and found which ones came before and after this one. So it's like the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans had been out.
Yeah. I think it definitely pulls from. Wait, were the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans out?
I think those were like 2001, 2002.
Maybe.
But what that means is that this falls in its structure much more like a spy movie than a superhero movie, which is really interesting.
Oh, 100%. I was definitely picking up on that. Like, in terms of visual style of what to pull from, I mean, maybe you could say X-Men in the fact that they have to travel in like a super jet, super rocket jet, and they wear matching outfits.
And the idea of trying to get rid of the people with special powers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but also very much the fact that, the whole thing is structured like a Bond movie.
Oh, no, yeah. It's Bond. It's Mission
like
Impossible.
Yeah.
It's not...
Secret Island.
Yeah.
Temptress. Lava flow volcano, like the bad guy lair
with
super
with all the gadgets.
The little cars running around on a track are literally straight out of a Bond movie. The fact that
they have to go on a mission and like sneak around and hide and stuff. That's not how superheroes work these days.
Yeah, that's a Bond movie.
They go in guns blazing, but we're sneaking into the base. We got to shut down the bad guy's plan, that kind of thing.
And it doesn't really go full super, and there's full super at the beginning of the movie when they're definitely just fighting crime and like what is essentially like a short film that starts off the movie. And then they're super at the very end of the movie where they're literally fighting the giant robot. And that giant robot fight is very much based off of what Brad Bird was pulling from for the superhero elements, which was 60s and 70s comic books. Yeah. And that was very much a 60s or 70s comic book fight. Just saying that as somebody who's read a few. But yeah, for the most part, the in-between part where like Bob is living out his fantasy, we're definitely going back to like that male mid-century American wish fulfillment thing out of the Bond series, which is very much what Bob is doing as he feels completely stifled in the home routine of a family, which I think is something that is definitely common for a lot of, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I think it's definitely like a problem that is it getting closer being worked out in like terms of like how to find fulfillment for both mothers and fathers in raising a family in suburbia, but it definitely is like not an uncommon theme. Like it's a very relatable theme. I feel like probably a lot of audience members latched onto that very directly,
especially for a movie with a family target audience.
Yeah, and of course a lot of the audience members latched on very directly to. Why do I always blank on Elastigirl's real name?
Helen?
Helen, yes, Helen. A lot of them latch on to Helen, who's voiced by Helen Hunt.
Yes.
I just realized that. Like Helen
Wait,
Hunt.
Is her name Helen? I can't remember either.
Maybe we're just thinking of Helen Hunt.
Holly Hunter. See, that's
Holly
where we're getting
Hunter.
it wrong. Okay.
Dang it. Too many H's.
Okay. Holly Hunter plays Helen Parr. Got it. That's not confusing at all. But yeah, that goes into one of the themes that I think is pretty common in family movies that this movie speaks to really well is the work-life balance thing. The dad, especially the dad with work-life balance issues, who is so overworked or feels so unfulfilled at work that it starts to affect his relationship with his family.
Oh yeah, he's totally disconnected from his family at the start of this movie. I mean, like even the way they shoot that dinner scene, which by the way, dinner scenes, big thing in family movies.
Oh, yeah.
They were in Royal Tenenbaums. They're in The Incredibles. They're in The Road, technically.
Yes,
but it's a very big thing. It's like a central piece of like what being a family is like eating together.
Yeah.
And like he's totally separated. Like the cinematography is really good in that scene. The rest, Helen and the kids are in one angle, and the other angle,
just him,
is Bob. And the closest he gets is when he's in a shot with Dash, and it's when he's talking with Dash about Dash using his superpowers. And the second that conversation gets cut off, he moves away.
So that scene is actually a perfect example of one of the things that I think is pretty brilliant about the way this movie is structured, and especially for a movie with a large portion of children as its target audience, is the way this movie moves. It moves so well in that any time we are being fed important information, there is always something else happening in the scene. So whenever he gets the summons from Syndrome to go to the thing, and he's got the little message playing, and he's got to write it all down, and his wife is yelling at him through the door.
The Mission Impossible message that's going to blow up.
Yeah,
after.
exactly.
Yep.
And Helen is yelling at him through the door, and as he's learning about Dash using his powers, there's like people running around, like everything is happening at the same time. Even when they get the phone call from the babysitter about all the weird stuff happening, and Dash is yelling about how cool the whole climactic scene was. And so that makes the world feel real, and it makes it feel like, the hecticness of raising a family and having all of this stuff going on at the same time. And it also makes us pay attention to what's happening, because if the character is having a hard time paying attention, we're like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out what's being said. So it makes us pay attention, and it just, it keeps exposition from being stale. It's because there's a lot of exposition that we got to get through, especially at the beginning when we're trying to figure out how the superheroes work in this movie. And then as we're trying to figure out like what the mission is, and then who Syndrome, what he's doing now, and all this kind of stuff. And also the way that it has this meta element of poking fun at superhero and spy movies, where they constantly bringing up monologuing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm very glad that they don't spend too much time on the question of whether or not superheroes should exist. I don't know why that's so popular. I feel like it's been done a few times, and the few times it has been done, it's been done really well. Yeah, and those are like the physical comic book versions of Watchmen and the original Civil War. In Marvel, not the movie, not necessarily movie version, but those two.
Is that the same thread in X-Men? Because that was the big thread in the movies of the X-Men.
Well, in X-Men, it's more of like a whether or not these people should physically exist. Like it's like kind of like a genocide thing going on to it. But in Civil War and Watchmen, it's more of like should we police the people with the power who when some people are way more powerful than the others? How does the power act? And I feel like that's interesting on like a philosophical level, but I also feel like a lot of superhero movies have been veering that way lately. And it's something that just feels like it gets really repetitive to me very, very quickly. Like there's more things to explore through the film lens of superheroes than that. So I'm glad they only spent it's like a plot point in this movie, and you just move on.
And it's more like a vehicle for the theme of, using the unique parts of yourself and how much do you lean into that and that kind of thing. It's more of like just this background layer of the world is going to try and suppress that.
The question, I feel like they kept bringing up the question of if everybody is special, then nobody is special. Yeah, which I think is a good question, but do they really get to like an answer in this movie?
They don't. I don't
feel like
really
they do.
Satisfy that. They just kind of use that as a kind of like a background motivation for Syndrome, I guess. Which actually, one thing that we did not bring up on the last episode that I think is really important is the idea that we talked about revenge movies last time, and we talked about them specifically in context of protagonist's motivation of revenge. We didn't even mention the fact that way more antagonists have a revenge motivation than new protagonists. Usually, revenge is a negative motivator that fuels a lot of the conflicts in especially like spy and superhero movies.
Yeah.
This like resentment that causes someone to track down or like reach out the person that we're supposed to be sympathizing with, and then since we sympathize with them so much, we don't have any sympathy for whatever they did to this other person that makes them come at them, and that kind of thing. So that's what this is, and I think that the way that they build it actually ties into this idea of family and leadership and mentorship on the part of Bob, because Syndrome was kind of rejected by him. He's like, I always work alone. And then as he's trying to like still do his own thing, even though he's part of a family, and he's got to learn how to let his family be part of that and guide them on this mission, and raise his son to use his powers responsibly and all that kind of stuff. He's got to kind of learn how to be that person that he wasn't to Syndrome.
Syndrome is a villain with a point.
Yeah,
right. And those are typically like the best villains, like villains or antagonists who are definitely doing things that are wrong, but are maybe doing things that are wrong for partially right reasons. Like,
understandable reasons.
He's got a point. Like Bob is way too much of a loner, and that is a quick way to alienate people from his life and turn them into enemies, like he did with Syndrome. And you can tell throughout this movie he's gotten or is getting very close to doing that with his family, into turning them into somebody like who are antagonists to him, basically. And that's not the way it has to be. They can be a team if he's just willing to let them in and let them participate in his life and him participate in their life, and all work together as a group and a team, and a superhero team. And that's the point it gets to over the course of the movie, which is interesting. Jonathan, how do you feel about the early 2000s animation in this movie? Do you think it holds up?
I was actually thinking about that.
Because it sticks out right away. Yeah. And then you kind of at least in my experience, you kind of just fade. You get so engrossed in the story that you just forget about it partway through.
It works. It's just, I think that the biggest difference is the level of detail in the textures and stuff like that. Like, I really like a lot of the really early animation stuff as far as the way that they kind of hold to classic animation techniques of, using very like building their characters around shapes. So, like the Muscle Man is triangle and that kind of thing. And I feel like as we kind of inch our animation towards realism, we lose some of that, which I kind of just like in the classic animation. But yeah, the just kind of how smooth and how simplified everything does definitely stand out at the very beginning. But like you said, you kind of forget about it at some point because the story is much more what's important.
Yeah. And you know what? I haven't seen the second Incredibles, but an interesting thing to look at, I don't know, have you seen it? Okay, you have seen it. So obviously they made the second movie like 15 years after the fact, which I don't know. You can have your own opinion on sequels, but how do you think they did in terms of adapting the animation style? Obviously, 15 years in advances in technology and style, you have the opportunity to have a much more detailed, much more texturized world, but with characters that were developed, built, and distributed under 2004 technology. So you have styles that were designed way back when using old stuff. How do you adapt it to the new stuff? How do you keep it consistent? Because from what I've heard, like the two movies in real time in the movie verse are very close together. Yeah. Like they basically one takes place right after the other. So it's not like there's a time jump. So how did it feel? Did it feel like they still had the same shape, but maybe more texture or?
Yeah. And I haven't watched it since it came out, which was several months ago now, but it did feel like a little bit, some of the new like character designs and stuff like that didn't feel quite as stripped down. Like they had a lot more, I guess, personality to them in a way that The Incredibles, like everything is kind of purified down to its essence. So, you know, the simplicity of The Incredibles suits and stuff like that, which we got to get to Edna in a second.
Oh, yeah, we will.
But yeah, I haven't looked at them back to back to see like the textures. I know there's some, definitely some elements of it, like a scene that takes place in a very dark setting, and of course the kind of infamous strobe lighting scene and stuff like that felt a little bit different. But I think overall it was not something that stuck out to me when I was watching the movie. But Incredibles 2 is actually on Netflix, so if you want to go see what you think about it, you can do that there until Disney launches their thing anyway.
Well, what if I don't like watching movies, Jonathan?
Then you're in the wrong place, my friend.
Then why are you watching the show? Okay, so of course we have to talk about Edna Mode.
Based on real life
Edith Head.
Costume designer.
Also, just real quick, because I realized it on this watch too, Edna, obviously Edith, but mode is also a way to refer to the trending fashion, or if it's in the mode, it's in the current fashion or the current what's relative. Also as a math term, it's a way to refer to the most common numbers. So it's all connected. I'm sure like there's some Latin root out there, but I don't care. You're the guy who looks up Latin stuff. I don't look up Latin stuff. But yes, obviously Edith Head is super famous. She was like the top of the costume designing world for decades, throughout like the late 40s up until like the end of the studio system.
We actually talked about her in one of the
probably in one of the Hepburn episodes,
because she tried to costume Audrey Hepburn and couldn't get something that flattered her, and so Audrey Hepburn found I forgot his name,
French designer,
the French dude,
to work with him. But Edith Head still got credit, because the way credit works in Hollywood is weird. Anyway, Edith Head, obviously big. I love that they have that classic film nod in here.
Also, you just learned who voices Edith Head on this watch through. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was Brad Bird at all.
Brad Bird himself voices Edith Head, which is just perfect.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Also, apparently, that's actually how Edith Head talked.
Oh, really?
Like, she was modeled very directly off of how Edith Head acted and talked. That's very close to how she actually spoke.
She kind of steals this movie. Like, her character
she does.
Just hilarious.
She's a very big personality. She's very all about her. She also was one of the other reasons she was very successful, besides just being very good at her job and being a big personality and having like, I've been entertained by this thought lately that came up in one of the autobiographies I've been reading about star quality behind the camera, which is possible. Like, you don't have to be in front of the camera to have a star quality, to have people. You just have to have that personality trait where you stick in people's minds, and that's a big help. And Edith had definitely had that.
I feel like a modern example is probably like Roger Deakins or something.
Probably.
Anyone who's kind of like interested in behind the scenes stuff, like, knows Roger Deakins is the guy.
It's the Howard Hughes book that I was reading.
Oh, okay.
He was never an actor, never on camera that I know. Maybe he was in like a small part, but it hasn't been mentioned yet in the book. But he definitely had star quality behind the camera, and that he was just such a personality and such an eccentric that like you knew about him and you were interested by him, and that had power. But also Edith Head apparently you have to spend all this time with an actor when you costume them, measuring them, working with them, trying stuff on, trying different things, trying alterations. She would hear lots of stories from lots of different actors, never gossiped.
Oh, interesting.
Never at all. You could tell Edith whatever you wanted, and she was like a steel trap. And because of that, people loved working with her. So lots of different currencies available in the movie making industry.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So anything else to say about The Incredibles?
No, I think it's
very red.
It's very red. It definitely, like, again, the cinematography is really good, and you can do so much with animation, even in this really early period. This is 10 years after Toy Story, and we already talked about Toy Story and the beginnings of computer animation in the Toy Story episode. But there's so much you can do, and I think that they kind of live up to its potential.
I love that it's a transition. They go from blue costumes to red costumes. Yeah. The superpower of the person is obviously very connected to who they are.
Oh, the other thing I was
like
going to say,
he has to be strong. Helen is the super flexible mom who accommodates everybody. Violet is the teenage girl who feels awkward and wants to be invisible. Dash is the ADHD child.
Yeah.
And Jack, I guess could
he's
literally
full of potential.
He's full of potential.
Yeah.
He could literally be anything. And
if you are not familiar with the Jack Attacks short film,
I think
go check
one
that
of
out.
the reasons why they held off on making a sequel so long is that while the ending with Jack is so good, it is kind of like a problem child if you want to take the story any further.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
What do you do with a kid who has 10,000 superpowers? How do you wrangle that? Like, how do you make that work?
Yeah,
it's a lot. So I guess eventually they decided to just put it right afterwards, so Jack would still be a baby, and they could work with that.
Yeah, and that's part of. It's not the main thrust of the second movie. It actually does. The second movie has a lot of those family themes, as far as like what happens when the mom goes back to work and the dad has to stay home and that kind of stuff. But Jack, they have to start learning how to kind of control those, and they kind of like use him to help them on a lot of stuff, just like by figuring out what commands can trigger certain abilities and that kind of thing. But yeah, I do want to bring up, as far as The Incredibles, that one thing that happens, and I feel like a lot of family movies, but it's a little bit of an overlap with another arc genre, which is the coming of age story. I feel like in The Incredibles, we have coming of age story for Violet especially.
Yeah. And again, an arc genre is kind of this idea that we're working with, I guess.
Yeah.
We're writing a thesis or something that is a overarching genre that goes back to, that isn't time specific. So it's it could be anytime, anywhere, going back to like as old as stories as we possibly have. And it can be applied to any other normal
it's just
level
kind of
genre. Like a coming of age story could be a Western or sci-fi or a drama or a comedy. Like it could be anything. Just like a revenge tale or a family movie.
Yeah, it's basically like a theme that is so like ingrained within all aspects of the story of a film that, it kind of, the film takes on all the qualities of the theme to some extent.
And it still works with like tropes and expectations like a genre would. So like when you hear a revenge tale, you expect certain things. When you hear a family story, you expect certain things. Like a dinner scene. Or when you hear a coming of age story, you expect certain things to happen. It's going to be unique based on what the specific story is, obviously, and then what standard level genre you have. Like there's there's arc genre, there's genre, and then there's subgenre.
Subgenre, right.
So we'll write a book. I don't know. Do you want to write a book?
Not yet. But yeah, so I feel like, especially when you're dealing with families, especially with younger kids, coming of age stories are, mostly dealing with adolescent people who are figuring out the world, figuring out themselves. And so when you put that, but just as like a character in a film that deals with family in a much broader sense, you can kind of get like a little mini coming of age story in there. I feel like the Royal Tenenbaums kind of skips over that. Like they could have had that, but they go from them being kids to being adults.
I feel like the point in the Royal Tenenbaums is that they grew up, they got older, but they didn't grow up.
Yeah,
so they
have
a delayed coming of age story. So that's where we're at.
Yeah,
in the Royal Tenenbaums, in a way, I feel like if I had to pick an arc genre for fall under, I would definitely say family.
Right. I'm just saying, like, as far as putting an element of another genre in there, The Incredibles definitely has a little bit of a coming of age story within it. And also, like you were saying, as far as like abilities kind of matching the personalities, Violet, like, she almost becomes, even though it is part of her character, she kind of like takes a backseat through a lot of the movie. She's not like the stand-up one, but even with the scenes with her and Dash, just by the nature of
her
Dash,
and Dash have fairly small parts.
Yeah,
and I mean Dash is probably slightly bigger than her just because of his personality.
Yeah, he's the instigator, and she's more of the like protector and reactor. After that happens.
Yeah, she's got invisibility and force fields.
Yeah.
Yep.
which is super cool, but not totally explored here. All right, so with all that, let's get a little dark, Alex, and let's move on to The Road.
The Road from 2009. The world has ended, but some of humanity still hangs on. A father and a son are among them, traveling to the sea where they hope it will be easier to survive. The road is full of danger, though. Roving gangs, packs of people turn to cannibalism, thieves, the dying and the soon-to-be dead. The father himself has a cop that he's sure will kill him. He desperately teaches his son how to survive without him. They are the good guys, carrying the fire to the sea. But those who have survived this long, years even, since the end of everything, have done so at a cost. They forfeited part of their humanity, becoming ruthless and cruel. The father is torn between these values that have kept him alive and the kinder ones he's taught to his son. And the son struggles in the dissonance between the father's actions and his words. Can they make it to the sea alive? Will that keep them alive? And when all is gone, what is worth hanging on to?
All right, so The Road is very different from these other two movies.
I thought the brightness setting on my screen was messed up.
Oh, no.
When I watched it, I was like, I can't see this. Oh, no, it's just really dark.
Yeah.
Both literally and metaphorically.
Yeah.
It's just very, very dark. And the apocalypse is a lie, Jonathan.
Oh, is it?
It's a lie.
How so?
Well, and this is very much based off of the opposing worldviews that he has to teach, that he's teaching his kid. Like he's both like teaching his kid, like, we're the good guys, we carry the fire, which whatever that means. It's just like something you say in a book. And at the same time, he's doing all these really aggressive, protective, defensive, almost inhuman, cruel things to keep himself and his son alive, even when maybe it's not necessarily required. So his worldview is very much the world is ending. The trees are going to be gone. The animals are already gone. And the kid, which, and I still, for the life of me, this is probably my biggest problem with the movie. I don't fully understand how his character has gotten to be how his character is. And we'll discuss that.
Okay.
But the kid definitely sees more hope in the world. And he's like, if we act humanely, maybe there's hope. And maybe I have to believe that we are the good guys, that we are carrying the fire.
I think the fire is hope.
And that makes sense. And as they get closer to the beach, they start to see like a bug. Like, how, I thought all the animals were dead. Why is there a bug? And like the family he's rescued by at the end has a dog. Maybe all hope isn't gone at the end of the movie. Maybe the bleak outlook that the father had wasn't completely right, but maybe it was the bleak outlook that kept him and his son alive long enough to get his son to where he needed to be. But then again, this is a movie that's all about the sacrifices that you make for your children. So maybe that was the point.
Yeah. So this one is very different in that it's much more kind of granular. We have a father and a son. I was thinking about, since we just watched The Revenant, it's kind of hard to not kind of compare them a little bit, because it's almost the opposite. It's like, what if the son had survived and everyone else hadn't? And like, how do you stay alive? And it also like treads the line of like this zombie movie kind of a thing. It's almost like a more realistic zombie movie. But yeah, it plays with a lot of other themes, but a big thing is like, what do we pass on to our kids and what do we teach them versus what do we actually believe? Like, what do we want them to carry on? And I feel like they're kind of on opposite journeys, because I feel like Viggo Mortensen's character is devolving. Like, he's getting to the point, they never like say that he's getting to the point where he might actually eat his kid. It's always, will die rather than be eaten.
Yeah, he's got that bullet thing going on.
Right. But I feel like he's losing his humanity like as we go along, because the things that he's doing to keep his son alive are kind of getting colder and colder towards other people. And the son sees that and he's like,
and it's definitely like the way the whole world's going.
Yeah.
Like everybody's got like the whole, we were following you, you were following us. No, you were following us. Like this this mass paranoia thing going on. Well, as mass as you can get with like 10 people left in the world. But yeah. Yeah.
And it's also interesting, the good guys versus bad guys paradox, which they kind of play with. And so kind of like along the lines of what I was saying, as far as his interactions getting worse and worse. The first time that they meet the old man who had nothing, and they give him food and they talk with him, and they're like, okay, he's one of the good guys. He's not going to hurt us. And then the second time they come to the old man, they take all of his stuff because he was just kind of doing what it took to survive.
Yeah.
So it kind of, he's trying to keep that hope alive in his son while his hope is dying slowly as we go through.
I mean, all of the way in which he's literally burning out his own humanity to keep his son's humanity alive. Because, and I do have problems with the character of the kid, because the character of the kid comes across as really whiny. Because you're picking up on the sense that the father's like burning his own humanity to keep his son alive, both in terms of like his body and his soul. But like, definitely if they did things the kid's way, they would both be dead. But like, they would definitely both be dead.
Yeah.
And the only way the kid survives at the end is because he finds somebody else to protect him.
I wonder if, and I haven't looked this up, but I wonder if the kid in the book is younger than who they cast for the movie.
That might be it.
Because that would make a little bit more sense.
That would make a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. Also, okay, so I think maybe I should get into this now because I've been hinting at it.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that bugged me the most, and if you look at my notes, that's the only thing the notes are about the entire time. Like, I'll occasionally comment on something, but for the most part, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. The character of the kid being maybe between 7 and 10 years old, and having been born, as they established in flashback.
I thought he might actually have been between like 10 and 12.
Maybe. Yeah. And obviously, and I don't know if this is resolved in the book or if it just, they thought it came across in the movie, but it didn't. But it did not come across that this is a kid who was born into the apocalypse. Like, this kid was born, and they established it through flashback. He was born not long after the world, quote unquote, ended, in whatever mysterious way it ended. And he grew up in that situation with a father who was desperate to survive, a mother who was basically suicidal.
Hopeless, yeah.
And I mean, I'm guessing no interaction with any other people, or if there is interaction, that would explain why this kid understands concepts like friendship. Yeah. Like, they don't prove it, and they don't show I think the go-to explanation for why the kid has all this hope, why the kid acts like he was, and this is what really comes across to me as this kid acts like he grew up in a world that hadn't already ended. He acted like he was 6 or 7 or 8 when the world ended, and then he's carrying that hope over. And that's not the reality of his existence. And the only way to explain why he would think that is that this kid, a mix of his dad telling him that, indoctrinating him, and a mix of books. And they drop one line about books, but we don't really see any books.
And they're all like kids' books. Like, they have one kid's book or something.
Yeah, and we don't really see the dad indoctrinating the kid. Every time they talk about them being the good guys or them carrying the fire, the dad is like, yeah, sure, I guess we're the good guys, or yeah, sure, I guess we're carrying you said it, kid. Which either makes it feel like he mentioned it once and the kid glommed onto it way more than he intended, or all of this indoctrination, all of this hope bringing, all of this hope sharing happened long before the cameras rolled. In between the scene where the mom leaves to go die in the woods or wherever, and the scene where we start our journey. That in that space is where this dad indoctrinated the kid. But if that's the case, you have to show it. Yeah. Because otherwise it just feels off. And that's what it felt like to me. I know a lot of people didn't pick up on that or disagree with me, which is fine. But it struck a nerve with me that the character didn't exist quite right in the world. And it bugs me because it throws off it distracts from all of the really good metaphors and the question of whether or not life or humanity is more worthy of our respect and our sacrifice, and the questions of what you sacrifice for your children's life, even including like your own humanity to get them to a better place than you were. which is literally what he does. He gets him from one end of the road to the other to hopefully a better place, and literally delivers him to another family that unintentionally that will probably take better care of him, who were following them.
Yeah, they were following them, which was...
All right, so your rebuttal, Jonathan. Do you agree with me or disagree with me?
I'm going to play devil's advocate just for a second, because I think that the period of time in question, which again, they don't show, and that's where the vagueness comes in, and I understand the argument that they should have shown it, or it would have been stronger if they had, is I think it's between the time that he was born and the time that his mom left. So like...
Which is possible.
We don't know.
It seems like they might have had a more settled post-apocalyptic life beforehand.
That's the question, is like, how slowly did people devolve into cannibalism? Because I assume there's a period of time where they have food, like people are still kind of going about their business, and then as those things get depleted, then people start devolving, and then that's when they have to leave their house.
Yeah. There is a lot of intentional vagueness in the movie. Yeah. Which works with a lot of the themes because a lot of the details just don't matter. But when it comes to like this disconnect in how characters acting, I feel like that's what keeps this movie from being, I think it just crosses the line of good for me. And I think it's what keeps the movie from being like great. Yeah. Like,
and I'd be interested to, because I haven't read the book, but I'd be interested to know like how much more information we get about that and like how that plays out.
And, you know, it could be something as simple as like the lines read off of the page in your own head don't feel the same as how they were acted. The acting choices cooked up between the child actor and the director, and whoever else was involved with it on set. I don't know. Yeah. So, but however it came to be, a disconnect is definitely there. And I picked up on it, and probably just because I was writing notes for it is why it bugged me so much.
Because you're thinking really hard about
it. I was honing in on stuff. If I hadn't, it probably would have bugged me, but I wouldn't have made that big of a deal of it. Yeah. But definitely, like, looking at the nitty gritty of this movie, that seems like a big hole for me.
Yeah, because I think I was trying to take it more as far as its overarching themes and you know, the idea of carrying hope and like how far can hope get you when you've run out of all other resources and that kind of thing, which is definitely kind of a bigger overarching thing. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely one aspect that is not satisfactory about the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that one of the interesting things that they kind of bring up is the idea that when you start dreaming about good things, then you have to worry. There's definitely this thing that I started picking up on before Viggo Mortensen's line on it, in that every time he has a dream that's a flashback to the pre-apocalyptic world, where everything is good and he has life with his wife and everything is nice, he wakes up for every single one of those flashbacks like he just woke up from a nightmare. He wakes up startled and afraid. And then he finally has the line where he says, sometimes he asks me, you know, what to do when he has scary dreams. And he's like, I say that means that you're still fighting. It's when you start having the good dreams that you have to worry. And I think that kind of like goes over the whole thing in the idea of what are you focused on? Are you afraid for your own life because that's going to keep you alive? Or are you just remembering when you had a good life and you're not even like worried about preserving the life that you have right now? And I feel like that's one of the other things that kind of goes into this, is that he realizes that he's losing his hope. And so he's trying to keep that hope in his child, like we said, keeping that fire alive and that kind of thing. And that seems to be the biggest overall thing, especially, you know, played visually through the darkness in the actual cinematography, the fact that the wife walks into the darkness and that is kind of her death, so to speak, is that she just kind of accepted it and got swallowed up by the darkness, and that kind of thing. And also the whole film ends in a much kind of brighter setting than it started in. I mean, at the beach, all of the everything is a lot brighter, even though it's all still, overcast and gray. I just thought about this, but I wonder I don't think that this probably is, but I wonder if there's any kind of metaphor you can extrapolate from Carrying the Fire to the fact that Viggo Mortensen kills somebody with a flare gun.
Maybe. I mean, maybe it was just a happy accident, but it definitely works.
It kind of feels like
fire is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
And so is all of the actions that he takes to keep him and his son alive.
Mm-hmm.
They both keep him alive on the one hand, good, but eat away at him, bad.
Yeah.
Fire
they cause him to do destructive things to other people.
I mean, since the dawn of time, fire has been both a symbol of warmth, comfort, and life, but also one of ultimate destruction.
Yeah.
And it can consume you.
That's why the story of Prometheus is not a happy tale.
No, it's not. It's no bueno. So it is definitely working. I mean, honestly, it's working from some clearly fantastic material.
Yeah. And I feel like that's part. I feel like
that might be the biggest strength of the whole movie.
It's Cormac McCarthy. And that's, we talked about No Country for Old Men, and No Country for Old Men is also a movie that works on a very thematic level, and on a level where you feel like most of the content is under the surface. And I feel like that's what The Road is too. I also feel like probably adapting any Cormac McCarthy novel is just really difficult because it is so thematic and so, again, under the surface. There's a lot of stuff that's not literally conveyed through the plot points. And so maybe this is kind of the counterpoint to the way that No Country for Old Men was adapted, because obviously that's critically acclaimed, probably keeps a lot of those themes under, and we talked about that in our Coen Brothers episode. And this one, you can definitely feel all those themes underneath, but it's just whether they actually get to a point where they are conveyed as fully as they could be is in question.
Yeah, because it's not... Because art and storytelling doesn't work like a checklist, right? It's it's in there, check. It's about making it function together and fit together and come across in just the right way at the right time.
Does the audience feel it?
Do the audience feels it? A lot of the communicating happens at a level that the audience and sometimes even the creator isn't conscious of, because we create art and we tell stories to communicate things that can't be communicated any other way. Because if it could be put into plain words or plain sentences, or I could write you a note or wire you a telegraph, or send you a letter through the Pony Express to tell you something, then there'd be no need to make a bigger thing of it. There'd be no need for the story.
Yeah.
And I would just tell it to you straight. But to convey something that's that deep that I have to feel it to believe it, and to believe that you feel it too, to know that you understand. That's where storytelling comes in.
And even if you don't get it on the first watch, and you
sometimes
have
it takes
to go
a little
through
bit,
it, or you just have to kind of let it resonate with you for a while.
And as I didn't really see a lot of the positive qualities of the story in the movie until I had calmed down.
Yeah.
Away from whatever weird character gap I sensed, and kind of let it rest and let it turn over in my head and be like, oh yeah, no, this is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. I think as I was watching it, cause, I don't generally take notes as I watch, but I'm trying to pick up on stuff. And I think that I was kind of picking up on this really, dark kind of real life overtones. Basically, if you're taking it, again, we're trying to focus, on the family aspect. And it's how do you raise your kid in a literal dog eat dog world? I mean, that's what this is. It's, everyone in the world will literally chew you up and spit you out if you give them the chance. And it's how do you navigate that world without succumbing to it, without trying to be the top predator. And that's taking it into a really broadly metaphorical sense. But I feel like you can do that because that's kind of what this type of material is built for. It's going out in any, if you want to extrapolate it to business venture or friendship or anything, to some extent, at least if you're coming at it from a very cynical point of view, everything is a cannibalistic environment, and it's a matter of keeping yourself alive and also keeping, your morals in place and trying to not become that, because if everyone becomes that, then everyone's going to eat each other. You have to have people who are willing to be the good guys, as they say in the movie. I mean, that's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which in like the reverse of what we were talking about earlier about sacrificing part of your humanity for survival, sometimes part of preserving your humanity means sacrificing a little bit of your survival.
Yeah. Which is what Viggo Mortensen does.
Oh, yeah.
He chooses to die rather than eat his son, which is kind of,
I didn't get that he was thinking about eating his son.
No. I don't think so either. But in the context of the whole world, you get the sense that other people have chosen to eat their children rather than die. But Viggo Mortensen does not do that.
Yeah.
And then we get to Guy Pearce's family. Hey, Guy Pearce made it to 3 episodes in a row. Good job.
Do we send him like a silver Filmlings button for that?
I don't know. He'll probably ask for royalties after we do that.
Yeah.
But then we get to Guy Pearce's family, which is even bigger, and they've all survived together.
With a dog.
Yeah. One of the dynamics that I think is really interesting in this movie that's not explored at all, but it's like, how do the cannibal clans like operate? Like, what is their pact that they have to not eat each other and only go out and hunt for other people?
I think
together?
It lasts as long as they have people to hunt for.
Right.
But once the people to hunt for dries up or is gone or their store of people vanishes, then they start eating each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's another element of family that goes into this movie. Okay, so we've covered...
What does family mean to you, Jonathan?
Family is the people you are stuck with, but you still have to love in order to have a good life.
That's his acting reel, people. He's available for bookings. Just hit him up.
Oh gosh. Yeah, so we got a good range, like lots of different types of family movies.
I feel like this easily could have been like a family movie episode, and I feel like it went in a much better direction. I feel like we dug into something that means a whole lot more to a whole lot of people. I feel like, I mean, again, like we talked about this with Revenge, but I feel like family even more so is more widely relatable.
Oh yeah,
to everybody.
Oh yeah, even on the bonus podcast, I keep coming back to Shazam, which is kind of
Shazam.
Alex can't get past the word Shazam.
It's so fun to say Shazam.
But that was kind of that hodgepodge, band of misfits kind of a family story, which is, another type of family movie that obviously has a lot of different entries in the annals of cinema. But yeah, so we've got the really dark, really real, but still showing the humorous side. We've got the I don't know how to sum up The Incredibles. It's like having to learn how to work together as a team kind of movie. The what do you pass on? And
it's weird. The Incredibles actually feel maybe the closest to like a real American family.
Yeah,
like in a weird way.
I mean, it's kind of what they're supposed to do,
which is what they're going for.
They're literally a caricature of a family.
Their secret lives are their extreme lives.
Yeah. But even like with, like you were saying, even with their powers, it just makes like the real family aspect feel exaggerated, but still like completely identifiable. Like they don't feel like they're different from growing up with any other kind of family just because. Which is
part of the fun of a movie, right? Like it's exaggerating things, like blowing it up bigger than life. It's why the Tenenbaums are so dysfunctional and why the road is so bleak. Just gray. I feel like it's one of those movies that I should have watched in a theater. Not that I would have in 2009, but that I should have, just because I felt like I barely saw it on my screen at home, and it just needs like that projection in the dark room to actually be able to like physically see the movie. I mean, we're not even talking about the way it's intended. I mean, physically see the movie. Yeah.
So but I mean, the thing that holds all of these families together obviously is love. This is not like, we didn't cover any movies where families like literally have something so wrong with them that they have to be separated from each other, or like this isn't any kind of Hamlet
Yep.
uncle kills father, that kind of thing.
No direct family murder, no splitting up of families. I mean, I guess there's technically a divorce in one.
Yeah.
But it feels more like the family's coming together than breaking apart with that divorce.
The story
which is
them,
wonderfully ironic.
Right. Yeah, the story is them coming together and coming to terms and realizing, because in Tenenbaums, Royal kind of has this thing where he has resentment and bitterness to this new guy coming into the family until he realizes he can actually do a better job, even though I guess, as we talked about, a lot of that job is kind of missed opportunity, like should have happened but hasn't. Although I did mean to bring up that Danny Glover is probably the only flawless character in the whole movie.
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah.
Not that they flesh out his character completely, but he's the only one that doesn't have anything against him. Like, there's no reason for him to not be welcomed into the family by the audience, at least.
Yeah.
The only thing that's kind of holding...
Which is good. If he had a flaw, then the audience could have made a logical point in their heads that he shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
And the point is that Royal has... The only reason... And Royal literally says it in the movie, that the only reason he wants back into the family now is because he saw that he had a shot of losing them, officially, with the arrival of Danny Glover. That's kind of what triggers the whole thing. So until didn't know what he has until it was gone, and didn't want it until it was gone.
Yeah.
And then he has to make do with what he has left.
And that's pretty overarching too, because we get that in The Incredibles also to some extent, where he doesn't realize how much he needs his family until his family's literally in danger of being killed. And then he kind of has this nice cathartic moment where he says, I'm not strong enough to lose you again. Kind of bringing his strength, again, a physical manifestation of this kind of metaphorical part of his character, that he feels like the strong guy. He feels like he should be strong enough to carry the family on his own, but he realizes that he needs them. And the only way that he can keep them is to, kind of team up with them and allow them into his mess and his problems and his battle.
It means full involvement.
Yeah.
On all sides.
Yeah.
Yep. And he finally gets to that point over the course of it. Lots of lessons that can be, I mean, we talk about movies with lessons, but this week has some of the most applicable lessons out of all of the weeks that we've covered, in terms of just like, nearly all of this can be applied to everybody's life. You
don't make like a good, meaningful family film without something to say about the way that we should be treating the people that we're stuck with. Again, to come back to that phrase. Yeah. Because otherwise it's just meaningless. And that's why we didn't pick
say lovingly. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? We didn't pick the movies that have nothing to say about family, because those are just kind of turn your brain off movies. But the movies that can be entertaining and thoughtful and meaningful, those are the ones that we really wanted to put our energy into.
How can you make the most out of the situation that you're inevitably stuck with?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how can you go from like that level of family love that is like, well, I guess I'm related to you, I love you, which is to actually like genuinely having real relationships with the people who you're related to, and going from like a required amount of love to like an earned amount of love, which is a very nice, healthy thing in a family relationship, if you can get it to that point, as we can see in the struggles in all of these movies.
Yeah. And in all of them, it requires, again, that openness and that allowing other people to get involved in the parts of your life that you really want to keep to yourself to some extent. Yeah. And even in The Road, I feel like the dark parts of himself are the happy memories that he has. It kind of flips it on its head a little bit, because when the whole world is dark, then you almost feel guilty for having those good memories that, the son doesn't have. He doesn't have any of those really happy and bright memories. So that's just a really interesting take on the whole family thing.
So Jonathan, what is happening next time on the podcast?
Next time on the podcast, we have returning guest Aaron Johnson.
Of Johnson & Johnson.
Of Johnson & Johnson. Just
Aaron
Not the
Johnson. Company, just the family.
Yeah, he's going to be talking about something that is near and dear to his heart, which is Disney and animation. He is...
Yeah, it's an oddball collection of movies, actually.
Yeah,
it's not the ones you would expect when you're thinking Disney animation.
Yeah.
But they all apply.
This is maybe the loosest theme we've ever done on the podcast, which is kind of 80s Disney. This is kind of an era of Disney when it was not doing well financially or critically, and then all of a sudden
Is this the era of the Goofy movie, or is that later?
I think that was 90s, so that's a little bit later. But
one day I will get the Goofy movie on the podcast. That's like maybe my favorite piece of Disney.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just because I have problems with everything else Disney. That maybe that's the one thing that has wormed its way into my heart.
That's hilarious.
But
maybe like one time.
Everywhere else I look, I see just business monopoly, business monopoly, business monopoly, and
then the Goofy movie.
The hatred comes over my eyes.
Yeah, so Alex will suffer his way through the podcast, but this is an era where Disney kind of went from really struggling to picking its head back up, and what has been termed like the second wave of Disney or something started to emerge.
And then they started making a bunch of original stuff.
Yeah.
Which they no longer do.
Or again, at least like adapting those fairy tales, kind of like the getting back to their roots, that kind of thing.
Right. Original stuff.
Original adaptations.
Before they started just remaking their own movies, which is where we're at.
We're not getting to that yet. But the movies we will be talking about are The Black Cauldron from 1985, Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988, and The Little Mermaid from 1989, which is really the movie that put them back on the map. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun to talk with Aaron about all of that. And if you would like to hear more from us about random stuff, or specific stuff that I'm going to tell you right now, the last week's episode of the Patreon podcast, which you can get if you subscribe for $5 on Patreon, we talked about Mortal Engines, which was... That topic kind of went really broad in our conversation. It didn't stay on Mortal Engines.
A lot about it. It's an interesting bonus podcast, though. There's a lot of content on that bonus podcast.
Oh yeah.
So I would recommend tuning in for that one.
Yeah, and then we just recorded a new commentary track on The Long Goodbye, one of our neo-noir episodes. So we recorded that one together, so if you want to hear that, you can subscribe for either $10 on Patreon, or, as we've mentioned before, if you want to donate $9 on coffee, then we'll send you the latest Patreon commentary. So yeah, that's our donation plugs. Enough about money.
That's all there is to it. That's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garancher.
And I'm at the Blue Jay, 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right. See ya.
As a random drop.
Yeah, we could totally do that. Okay.
Hair swoop fix count number 3.
You don't have to worry about hair swoop.
Fixes swoop. Just use use a dab of pomade. A dab.
That's too much.
You get a matte finish.
Effort.
Dab pomade, hair dry. Your hair will stay pretty much in place. It'll still be light and flexible. Done.
All right, new channel. The Hairlings.
The Hairlings. We fix your swoop.